I want to tell you about the night my husband didn't come home. Not the dramatic version. Not the version with sirens and search parties and police tape. The quiet version. The version where you wake up at 2 a.m. and reach across the bed and the sheets are cold, and you lie there in the dark telling yourself there is a reasonable explanation. He fell asleep at the office. His phone died. He lost track of time. You tell yourself these things because the alternative, the thing your body already knows before your brain catches up, is too large to look at directly. Ryan and I had been married for 4 years, together for 6. We had met at a mutual friend's dinner party, the kind of meeting that feels scripted in retrospect. He was funny, warm, the kind of man who remembered details, your coffee order, the name of your childhood dog, the story you told once about your grandmother that you'd forgotten you'd even shared. Attentive, that was the word I used to describe him to people. He is the most attentive man I have ever met. I understand now what that attentiveness was really about, but on the night he disappeared, I was still the woman who believed it. It was a Tuesday. Ryan had texted me at 6:15. Working late. Don't wait up. Love you. Standard. Normal. The kind of text I had received dozens of times over 4 years of marriage. I made dinner for one, watched something forgettable on television, fell asleep on the couch with the lamp still on. I woke at 2 a.m. The apartment was dark except for the lamp. The other side of the bed, I had moved to the bedroom at some point, was untouched. I checked my phone. No messages. I called his number. Straight to voicemail. Phone's dead, I told myself. He fell asleep at the office. I lay in the dark and practiced breathing. In through my nose, out through my mouth, and waited for morning. Morning came. He did not. I called his office at 8:15. His assistant, a pleasant woman named Grace, who always sounded slightly harassed, told me Ryan had left the previous afternoon at 4:30. 4:30, 2 hours before his text to me. He had told me he was working late. He had already left the office. Is everything all right? Grace asked. Fine, I said. Thank you. I hung up, sat at our kitchen table, looked at the coffee I had made for 2 out of pure habit, and felt something cold and clarifying move through me. He lied. He had lied about where he was, and then he had disappeared. I called his best friend first. Have you heard from Ryan? A pause that lasted 1 second too long. Not since last week, Marcus said. Why, everything okay? Fine, I said again. Thanks. I was saying fine a lot. It was the word I used when nothing was fine and I needed time to think. I called his brother next, his mother, 2 colleagues whose numbers I had from our company Christmas party 2 years ago. Nobody had heard from him. Nobody seemed alarmed in the specific way that would have told me something. They were concerned the way people are concerned when something is mildly unusual, not the way people are concerned when they know something. Or so I thought. At 11 a.m., I went to his home office. Ryan worked from home 2 days a week. He had a small room at the end of the hallway, organized, minimal, the desk of a man who valued order. I had been in that room hundreds of times. I had never gone through it. Why would I? I trusted him. I trusted him the way you trust someone you have chosen to build a life with, completely, without audit. That trust, I was about to learn, had been the most useful thing about me. I sat at his desk, opened his laptop. He had never given me his password. I had never asked. We were the kind of couple who respected each other's privacy because we had nothing to hide. He had nothing to hide. I had believed that. The laptop required a password I didn't have. I sat back, looked around the room, and noticed something I had never noticed before. The filing cabinet in the corner. Ryan kept it locked. He had told me once, casually, unremarkably, that it contained client documents, confidential material from work. I had never questioned it. The key was on his key ring. His key ring was on the hook by the front door where he always left it, because he had left in a hurry, without his keys. I found the key, opened the cabinet. Inside were not client documents. Inside were 3 things that rearranged every single thing I thought was true. The first was a lease agreement, an apartment 40 minutes from ours, signed 18 months ago, Ryan's name on the contract. The second was a folder of bank statements from an account I had never seen, regular withdrawals, substantial ones, over 18 months. The third was a photograph. Ryan, a woman I didn't recognize, a child, a little boy maybe 2 years old between them, all 3 of them smiling. The little boy had Ryan's eyes, exactly. I put the photograph down on the desk. I sat very still, and I understood with perfect, terrible clarity why Ryan had left in a hurry. He hadn't disappeared. He had run. I called my sister. I didn't say anything when she answered. She heard my silence and said, "I'm coming." She arrived in 40 minutes. I was still sitting at Ryan's desk, the photograph still in front of me. She looked at it, then at me. She didn't say anything either. She just sat on the floor beside my chair and put her hand on my arm. That's what love looks like. Not words, presence. We went to the apartment on the lease that afternoon. I don't know what I expected. Evidence? Answers? Something to make the photograph make sense? What we found was a life. A fully furnished apartment, children's drawings on the refrigerator, 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom, a coffee mug that said "Best Dad" on the shelf above the sink. A life, running parallel to mine, for 18 months, while I was making dinner for 2 out of habit and falling asleep on our couch with the lamp still on. Ryan called at 7 that evening. I almost didn't answer. My sister, sitting across from me at our kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't drunk, looked at me when the phone lit up. "Answer it," she said quietly. I did. "Emily," he said. His voice was different, flattened, the voice of a man who has been waiting for a call he knew was coming. "I need to explain." "I've been to the apartment," I said. Silence. "I've seen the photograph," I said. "I've seen the bank statements. I've seen the drawings on the refrigerator." More silence. "How old is he?" I asked. Ryan was quiet for a long time. 2, he said. He just turned 2. 2 years old, which meant Ryan had known about this child, had been building that life since before our 3rd wedding anniversary, since before the trip to Italy we had taken to celebrate, since before the conversation we had had about starting our own family. He had been having a family without telling me. Ryan came back the next morning, not to stay. He knew, I think he had always known, somewhere underneath the performance, that there was no version of this where he came back to stay. He came to explain. And what he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table where I had made coffee for 2 out of habit just 24 hours ago, was this. He had met her 2 years before we married, a relationship that had ended, he had thought it had ended, and then resumed. The child had not been planned. He had been trying to figure out what to do. He had been trying to find the right moment. For 2 years, he had been managing 2 lives with the same attentiveness he had always applied to everything, the most attentive man I have ever met. I let him finish. I did not interrupt. I had spent the previous night preparing myself for this conversation the way you prepare for something you know is going to be hard, by deciding in advance what you will and will not accept, what you will and will not say, what you are and are not willing to carry out of this room. When he finished, I said, "I'm not going to ask you to choose. That's not what this is." He looked at me. "What I'm going to ask," I said, "is that you be honest, with her, with your son, and with yourself, because you have spent 2 years being none of those things, and that child deserves better than a father who manages his life like a secret." He left that afternoon. The divorce took 7 months. Clean, documented. My attorney, a woman named Patricia, who had the energy of someone who had heard every version of this story and was still angry on behalf of every woman in it, handled everything with precise and quiet efficiency. I moved apartments. Smaller. Mine entirely. I repainted the walls myself over a long weekend with my sister and Kara, and more wine than was strictly necessary. I hung nothing on the walls for 3 months because I wanted to choose carefully what I surrounded myself with. This time. People ask me if I hate him. I don't. Hate requires energy I decided to spend elsewhere. What I feel, when I feel anything about Ryan at all, is a complicated kind of clarity. He showed me exactly what it looks like when someone loves you for what you make possible rather than who you actually are. He needed me to be trusting, uncomplicated, the kind of wife who didn't look too closely. I was very good at that. I am not that woman anymore. The woman I am now asks questions, pays attention, trusts her instincts when they speak, and doesn't wait for proof before she listens. She is harder to manage, infinitely harder to deceive, and she sleeps, finally, completely, without reaching across a cold bed in the dark, in an apartment that is entirely, completely, beautifully hers.